to serve as the director of the Illinois State University Center for Civic Engagement. As you know, civic engagement is one of Illinois State University's core values. As a university, we seek to prepare students to be informed and engaged global citizens. We encourage them to be ethical leaders who are committed to co-creating knowledge and action. Civic engagement is not a single act. It is a lifelong responsibility forged by active participation in community. That's why it's so important that we take time today to honor and celebrate individuals and groups on our campus and in our community that exemplify this core value. Today's ceremony will begin with a presentation from the McLean County Museum of History. After the presentation, we will recognize several individuals on campus who are contributing significantly to civic engagement on campus and on a national level. Finally, we will announce the recipients of the 2021 Civic Engagement Awards. The McLean County Museum of History is a longtime partner and co-educator with ISU. The museum has been recognized in the past with the Civic Engagement Award for a community partner, and they recently partnered with ISU, Illinois Wesleyan University, and Heartland Community College for the 12 Months in 6 Words project. This project served as an opportunity for individuals throughout McLean County to reflect on the last 12 months. It captured 375 community responses in March, and those comments will be archived at the museum as well as in the ISU archives. I am really excited to have Hannah Johnson from the McLean County Museum of History with us today. Hannah is the Director of Youth and Family Education. She delivered a similar presentation to the students in the Introduction to Civic Engagement courses, and the students absolutely loved it. Please welcome Hannah for her presentation entitled Ever Engaged, the History and Future of Civic Engagement at Illinois State University. Hannah will begin her presentation with a land acknowledgement statement.
Thank you, Katie. So as mentioned, we want to start today's program by acknowledging that our community is built on the land of many Native nations. These lands are the traditional birthright of Indigenous people who were forcibly removed and have faced centuries of struggle for survival and identity in the wake of dispossession and displacement. We would like to acknowledge that this land we occupy was once home to the Illini, Peoria, and the Miami, and later, due to colonial encroachment and displacement, to the Meskwaki, Potawatomi, Sauk, Shawnee, Winnebago, Iowa, Mascoutin, Piankashaw, Waya, and Kickapoo nations. We also express honor to those Indigenous people who we may have been excluded in this acknowledgement due to erasure and historical inaccuracy. We also want to give credit to the various departments and programs at ISU who contributed to creating this acknowledgement statement and making it available to everyone to use ahead of future programming. So as we dive in, I do want to say that I am so glad to be here this afternoon with everyone. The Center for Community Engagement is such an incredible asset and resource to the community at large, as well as the university. And so to be asked here today to share the story of Ever Engaged, the history and future of civic engagement at Illinois State University is a great honor. And I do want to give credit to Christine Bruckner and her classroom because this really, this presentation was inspired by a request to share this information with her students, and I'm so glad that we've had a couple of opportunities since then to engage other classrooms with this content. So just to situate us in the framework of civic engagement as defined by the American Psychological Association, it is the individual and collective actions designed to identify and address issues of public concern. So as we move forward through the chronology today, that's really where we're starting, is addressing public concern. To situate us within ISU's past and present, though I'm speaking with an educated and well-acquainted audience today, I think it's always important to kind of circle back and start at the beginning. And so ISU was founded in 1857, as we know, as Illinois State Normal University, and is the oldest public university in Illinois. It was co-founded as a co-ed training school for white teachers the same year that Illinois' first Board of Education was convened, but we want to acknowledge that Black students were not admitted until after 1870. Classes were actually initially held in downtown Bloomington at Majors Hall, very close to the current site of the McLean County Museum of History, and eventually moved to the town of Normal. In 1968, the school was renamed Illinois State University, as we know. And I do think that, especially when this presentation is meant to engage students, right, that we acknowledge that as of fall 2020, there was a total on-campus enrollment of over 20,000 students, 57.6% of those as female identifying, 42% are male identifying, 26.5% of the student body are students of color, compared to 14.7% of faculty and staff. There's also 500 international students representing 69 different countries. So these are the facts and the figures that we want to keep in mind as we explore the history of this institution, as well as the present, and think ahead to the future. So we're going to start today with the story of Louanna Brown Sanders Clark. So we're looking back to 1939. As mentioned previously, Black students could not attend ISU until after the 1870s. And so that is actually relatively early compared to some other public institutions of education. But it's important that we remember that Black students were not permitted to live or dine on campus. So though they could attend classes and enroll in programs, they were forced to find their own housing and other amenities. We referenced the character of Rosanna P. Lindsay in 1876 to acknowledge kind of the murky history of the first Black student to graduate from ISNU. So though it is unproven that Rosanna P. Lindsay was potentially the first student to graduate from this university, John Freed actually explores this topic in his 2009 text, Educating Illinois. We want to question, right, and ask ourselves, why is there not a more clear indicator of these early Black graduates of this institution, and what can be done to better document that history moving forward? So Black students really did rely on the kindness and capability of local Black families to house them, one of which being Louanna Brown Sanders Clark. So pictured here along with Louanna is Elroy Young, Richard D. Ruffin, George A. Cross, Elon Dubois, and Lincoln B. Calvin, amongst dozens of others whom Louanna housed at her home. These gentlemen graduated the university with degrees in medicine and law and other professions, but none of them remained here locally. Again, simply because ISU was able to offer degrees to these students, it didn't mean that there were employment opportunities for them in Normal and the Bloomington area. And so we kind of think about that brain drain, right? That loss that our communities had simply because there weren't opportunities afforded to students of color after their graduation. So that brings us forward to 1967, which is taking quite a leap, but it demonstrates that the Normal Housing Ordinance, which was passed in 1967, we're talking about a decades-long process for residents and students of color to achieve a certain amount of equity and equality within our local community. And so in 1967, the town of Normal did pass a fairly weak housing ordinance that was actually made much more robust by the state of Illinois passing fair housing legislation in 1968. So the town never really had to make the full commitment to its local residents of color and other identities to open up housing in that way. But again, it's to reiterate that this struggle does not begin and end, as we know, in the 1930s, but continues along, which we'll see in reference to the Pilgrim Cafe. So the Pilgrim Cafe was actually located just adjacent to ISU's campus where the current Alamo 2 resides today. The Pilgrim Cafe is really known as the first local act on segregation. So we're talking 1947 in this case. This was a business that refused service to non-white customers. And there was a letter to the editor that was submitted by an ISU student asking, do you know the Pilgrim restaurant refuses to serve Black students of this school? That was printed in October of 1947. The Pilgrim Cafe was the site of 4 days of protest with Black and white students picketing outside the restaurant, almost all of which were World War II veterans. And so these veterans, and this is a story that we hear often, have returned to the United States, right? Have returned to their hometowns and other communities, no longer being afforded the respect and the opportunity that they encountered while fighting overseas. So there's a quote here from a veteran of ISU. We have attempted to defend at home those principles for which we fought abroad. So the Pilgrim Cafe is an excellent example of how student activism and involvement really did result in change. In December of 1947, the Pilgrim Cafe was integrated, but again, it's important that we continue to acknowledge, right, that it wasn't until the mid-1960s that the town of Normal came out saying, at this time, we can safely claim, right, or accurately claim that most dining establishments and business establishments are non-segregated, are open to business to all customers. So again, this is a stepping stone in that journey, but it's a significant one, and it is very specific to the actions of ISU students and staff. And it's actually through the Illinois State Historical Society, who has hundreds of markers established throughout the state of Illinois, including one marking the former segregation of Miller Park Beach at Miller Park. There's a plan in the works to erect a marker at the Pilgrim Cafe site to acknowledge this historic event and the efforts of ISU staff and students. So moving forward into the 1960s, of which we've already referenced, I want to share the story of Mrs. Louise Pennick, who was actually a Bloomington resident. She lived at 1714 Illinois Avenue in Bloomington. But Mrs. Louise Pennick was a victim of urban renewal efforts. So Bloomington had a Department of Urban Renewal and the Citizens Advisory Improvement Committee, and the city had condemned Mrs. Pennick's home. This was a woman who was widowed. She was in her 80s. She didn't have the means to care for her property in the way, to conduct the repairs that were needed. And so knowing that, that her home had been condemned and that it was unfair for the city of Bloomington to be condemning her home and forcing her out of her place of residence, organizations like us, which was actively headed by Carol Cox, a former professor of ISU, Students for a Democratic Society, also an ISU organization, and the Committee for Social Action came together to collect what was then $1,200, which would equate to about $10,000 today, to do the necessary repairs and save this home from condemnation. They put on a new roof and downspouts, paneling, they plastered, painted the interior of the home, installed a new bathroom, checked all of those boxes. They also put together a leaflet that stated who stands, or posed the question, right? Who stands condemned? And looking very specifically at the racial disparity and the racial injustice that was being perpetuated through these acts of urban renewal. And in May of 1969, there was a council meeting held where basically the decisions were going to be made on the status of Mrs. Pennick's home and whether or not she would be allowed to continue to reside there. And ISU student John Keller narrated a presentation of work done at Mrs. Pennick's home, of which we referred to earlier. But after going through all of the successive progress that they had made at the home and, advocating for Mrs. Pennock to be allowed to reside in her home, he ended this presentation with a reference to the home of the urban renewal inspector, noting the various code violations that his gutters and other elements of his home were posing, as well as the cluttered and unfit nature of his garage, right? So again, challenging the council as well as those present to question, why is it Mrs. Pennock here who is being, criticized for her home status, and what are the true motivations behind these acts of urban renewal. So 1970, the flagpole incident. Those familiar with ISU, this is not going to be a new story, but it is an integral one to the history of civic engagement at the university. And so though this story starts soon before 1969 into 1970, we can agree that ISU, as well as campuses across the nation, were divided. So locally here on the campus of ISU, we had the group Students Against the War, and then also the group Victory in Vietnam Association. And these were two groups that would spearhead more or less the two prongs of the war sentiment, right? So we have pro-war and anti-war. In October of 1969, there was a nationwide effort to host a moratorium day, which essentially was an opportunity for anti-war groups to host various events, right, and opportunities for communities to come together and acknowledge the issues that were being presented. 200 people attended a worship service here on campus. Over 800 people attended a reading of The War Dead. Black armbands were passed around. So this was a successful day for the anti-war groups. It was a peaceful day, and it inspired them to plan further actions. But if we fast forward to May of 1970, we know that peace and calm were not long for the anti-war movement and even the pro-war movement. So in May of 1970, we have the incidents at Kent State and Jackson State, where a number of students are shot and killed by either National Guardsmen or state police. And this really just set off the largest wave of student protest up until this point. And ISU's campus, Illinois Wesleyan's campus, right, we're not exempt from this. And so following, really the day immediately following the Kent State shootings, there were hundreds of students who gathered and occupied a building on ISU's campus. 75 essentially students cornered President Braden at the time to set forth a few demands, one of which centered very much on the flagpole on campus. And so it was agreed by President Braden that the flagpole would be lowered for 6 days to acknowledge the deaths at Kent State, as well as recent killings of Black Panther Party members. And then also in addition, that May 19th of that year, the flagpole would be lowered again in honor of Malcolm X's birthday. And so there was a lot of backlash and protest against the decision to lower the flag for those 6 days. But it's really this May 19th event that, brings so many people back to this time period and conjures up those visions of protest and unrest on campus. And so on May 19th, the flagpole of 1970, the flagpole was lowered and at half-mast, and there were construction workers who were working adjacent to the flagpole who took it upon themselves to raise it back up. And once that happened, they basically brought in reinforcements, the university did, to lower the pole and to guard it. So there were ISU security and staff guarding the flagpole to ensure that it would stay at half-mast. But unfortunately, there was a kind of fissure between the town and the university at that point. And so it was the mayor of Normal at that time, who Charles Baugh, who basically instructed police that if there were town of Normal police, if there were issues or violence or some other disturbance, that town of Normal police were instructed not to aid campus security or campus staff in addressing these issues. And it was actually the mayor who also organized other public, say, protests or community events to demonstrate Americanism, to demonstrate pro-war sentiment. And so there's this division not only within the campus, but also within the town and the campus at large. But through this, regardless, ISU remains the only public university in the state to stay open amidst the nationwide campus unrest. But immediately following, in June of 1970, President Braden did resign following kind of this hotbed May 1970 month of protests on campus due to political pressure from Springfield. So the beer riots, 1984, something maybe slightly more irreverent, but no matter what, an appropriate demonstration and example, again, of what student engagement can look like. So for those of us around in 1984, I missed this one, but in July of that year, a divided town council voted, noting while the students were on summer break, to enact ordinances that restricted mass gatherings and the sale of beer kegs. So you can imagine that a student body who was absent for 3 months in the summer comes back to campus, figures out that this legislation has been passed. So on October 3rd, an anonymous leaflet is circulated on campus, encouraging students to gather on the quad that night. From that leaflet and word of mouth, a gathering of 200 students on the quad grew to 1,000 students and took to the streets of Normal. That evening's events resulted in $6,500 or $1,600, $16,000 today in damages. Several people were injured. At least 5 students were arrested. You can hear pictured here David Lear, who was a Normal police chief, in the midst of the mob, we'll say, the groups of students protesting and organizing, trying to talk it out, right? To reach people one-on-one. And I will give a shout out. So TV 10 was present that night and captured amazing footage, actually directed by former Chief of Staff, Jay Groves. So very early in his ISU career. And that's available online. And I encourage everybody to look up those videos and the opportunity to capture the action as it was occurring, not to mention the 80s fashion, is quite significant. And I did want to note that Paul Harmon, who came on as Normal mayor in 1985, immediately following more or less the beer riots of the fall of 1984, said, "One of the things I hope to accomplish while I was mayor was not to have a beer riot. As I recall, we did not." So that's success in the eyes of Paul Harmon. So to bring us and conclude with a contemporary example, because we know that history is a continuum and every day our students and staff at ISU are making new history. It's important to acknowledge the WATTERSON events of 2020. So WATTERSON Towers opened in 1968. Every 5 floors in both towers are known as a house. And for, since the time that WATTERSON Towers opened, these houses were named for the first 10 secretaries of state, 8 of which we acknowledge we're complicit in slavery. And so again, because of an online petition, because of the vocal activism and advocacy of students and staff at ISU, this issue was brought to the attention of those who had the power to make decisions to change it. And so I know that the jury is still out on what the future names of these houses will be. But again, a contemporary example of the advocacy and the power that student voice and civic engagement can have. So knowing that oftentimes this is a presentation that's really meant to engage our students, you know, referencing and remembering, right? Reminding ourselves of the various ways that people have to get engaged civically while at ISU during their schooling. Obviously, the hundreds of RSOs, the media stations, the newspapers, student government. A shout out to the Culturally Responsive Campus Community Conference. As a community member and a community partner, this is an invaluable opportunity for community and university to come together and shape, you know, the larger community that we want to see. And again, the Center for Civic Engagement, everything that department brings to not only the students, but the community at large. So I do want to thank you for the time today. And as we again explored the history of civic engagement, it's such an excellent thing for us all to be here to talk about the present civic engagement that's happening here with our ISU staff. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Hannah, for that awesome presentation. Hannah is such an awesome example of a community co-educator, and I really appreciate that she centered the struggle for equity and anti-racism and how important that is to recognize that as a part of our history of Illinois State University, and just to continue to remember the importance of the interconnectedness between civic engagement and equity and inclusion. And the work that we still need to do to keep working towards that. I had the honor of having Hannah present in my class for the Intro to Civic Engagement, and our students were really inspired to learn of this history and to learn of student action and community action. And so if you're interested in finding out more about Hannah's presentation, please do reach out to the center and we can send you Hannah's information. And if you have any questions for her in the chat, we would be glad to send a follow-up email to all of you with additional information. So thank you again, Hannah. So the reason that we have a civic engagement celebration each year is because it's so important to honor those that contribute to our core value of civic engagement. And so I want to take a minute to highlight the individuals who are showcased on the slides prior to our presentation. First of all, I want to acknowledge the members of the Center for Civic Engagement's Advisory Board. These individuals have provided broad insight into civic engagement at ISU and help us explore strategic initiatives to advance engagement. And I am so grateful to all of these board members who have provided me with so much knowledge during my first year at ISU. So thank you so much, Civic Engagement Advisory Board. Next, we'll move on to recognize our civic engagement ambassadors. Nearly every academic department and many departments from the Division of Student Affairs have a civic engagement ambassador. These individuals are key to sharing information and encouraging civic engagement within their departments. The Community Consulting Board is a group of local organizations that also advise the Center for Civic Engagement and by extension ISU. They help to inform our interactions with the community as we continue to improve our practices and increase our partnerships. This year, I also want to take a moment to recognize the Voter Engagement Coalition. This cross-disciplinary team worked tirelessly for a year to ensure that ISU students were registered, informed, and showed up to vote, whether that was by mail, early, or on election day. And I'm very proud to say that these efforts earned ISU the designation of a voter-friendly campus. Last summer, several faculty members participated in the Civic Engagement course redesign program, and we'd like to acknowledge them as well. CTLT led this faculty development cohort that prepares faculty members to integrate civic engagement into their courses. As a side note, the call for proposals is still open if any faculty would like to apply for participation in the 2021 cohort. We'd love to have you join us. I also want to highlight 3 individuals from ISU who are working to advance civic engagement nationally. Doctors Byron Craig, Steve Hunt, and Scott Jordan are serving as American Democracy Project Civic Fellows for the Extending Empathy Project. The goal of the project is to promote the emergence of a more equitable and democratic public, where the ideas of diversity and inclusivity can flourish. They're exploring how empathy can promote a more robust and participatory democracy that leads to a more just and equitable public culture. And I sincerely believe that our society needs empathy more than ever. And so I'm really thrilled for the work that they have done for ADP and the legacy that they have created for ISU. When I go to ADP meetings, people always ask me if I know the fellows, and I know their work is very much appreciated nationally. Next, I want to recognize the work of 3 faculty members who received the Community Engaged Learning Grants for this year. Community Engaged Learning Grants are made possible through the financial support of the Provost Office. These grants encourage the incorporation of civic engagement into curricular experiences for students. Even with the limitations of COVID-19 this year, we were still able to award 3 faculty members funds. Bert Stabler is an assistant professor of art in the Won-Suk Kim School of Art. Bert used the funds to provide honorariums to guest lecturers in Art 201 and Art 212. Students in Art 201, Media Techniques and Inquiry for Elementary and Middle Level Schools, had the opportunity to hear from a veteran Chicago Little Village teacher on community projects with students, in-depth research, multiple levels of collaboration, and hands-on experiences outside the classroom. In Art 212, teaching in the Digital Art Studio, students participated in a workshop with Matt Steinke, a scholar, builder, musician, artist, and performer. Pauline Williams is an associate professor in the School of Teaching and Learning. Pauline used funds for the TCH 320 Assessment of Bilingual Learners and Bilingual Program Design. She invited ISU community partners from the Albany Park neighborhood of Chicago to speak to classes about their organization's roles in the partnership among ISU, community-based organizations, and schools to support the education of bilingual learners in the community. Students gain knowledge of the community, its government, social, political, and educational issues. Gavin Weiser is an assistant professor of educational administration and foundations. Gavin used the funds to support an honorarium for a guest lecture in HERE class EAF 489, Social Justice and Social Theory. The lecture focused on the concept of mutual aid, one form of civic engagement, and asked students to consider it as a form of leadership that could be practiced within higher education administration. So as you can see, we have had some amazing work in civic engagement across our campus community over the last year. And now I'm excited to announce the winners of the 2021 Civic Engagement Awards. But before I get to the nominees, I want to thank a few people. And before I thank the committee, I do want to thank the staff at the Center for Civic Engagement. They are so amazing, and they have created a lot of this program today. So first, I want to thank Harriet Steinbach, who served as interim director and who's the assistant director of the center, and she led our center and our strategic planning. And I also want to thank Christine Bruckner, who did so much of the work to build our collaboration to receive the Carnegie designation. I also want to thank Emily Nafziger, who is our amazing marketing and communication staff person, who makes us all look so beautiful and created this beautiful slideshow and is so creative, and I am just very grateful to work with her. I also want to thank Annie Weaver, who's our assistant director for co-curricular programs. She and the graduate students who have worked on service and alternative breaks. So Blair works on service and Janae works on alternative breaks, have just done an incredible job this year under the most difficult of circumstances to make sure that our students can still have the experience of partnering with and alongside communities to work for the public good. And I also want to thank Caitlin Hill, who is our graduate assistant for civic education and political engagement. who did a lot of work for this event today as well, and who did a ton of work on voter engagement throughout the year. And I also want to thank Beth Porter, who is our wonderful administrative assistant and budget manager, for all of her help throughout the year. Her knowledge of ISU is very lengthy, and her knowledge of ISU history, and she's just been so helpful to me during my first year here. So I wanted to take just a moment to thank all of our staff. And of course, I also want to thank the award selection committee for their time. And they asked me to convey what a difficult decision it was for them to choose our awardees today, because every single nominee was truly excellent. So you can see from all of the names of the nominees on the screen that so many people demonstrated an outstanding commitment to civic engagement this year. This extensive list truly reflects the commitment to civic engagement. This list is made up of individual nominees and the individuals that make up the group nominations. It is made up of faculty, staff, students, alumni, and community partners. Each person's contributions and commitment matter. And so now for the awards presentations. And if we were in person, we would applaud each recipient, but in the virtual environment, I encourage you to offer your congratulations via the chat instead. Or if you have any ISU gear and you want to hold it up and cheer on your own, that is great. So it's wonderful to have the chance to celebrate. The first award I'm going to announce is the Registered Student Organization Award. This award recognizes an RSO that has been significantly involved in civic engagement at ISU or in the broader community. These experiences prepare RSO members to be informed and engaged global citizens who will promote and further the goals of society. This year's honoree is the Student Wellness Ambassador Team. Redbirds Together Wellness Ambassadors was formed through the leadership of the Student Wellness Ambassador Team to share messaging to students during the COVID-19 pandemic. Student leaders were trained with COVID-19 prevention information and then became trainers to other students interested in becoming ambassadors dedicated to providing peer-to-peer education, reminders, and encouragement to their fellow Redbirds about how to prevent the spread of COVID-19. They focused on prevention messaging like physical distancing and the importance of wearing face coverings. These ambassadors were seen around campus, encouraging and motivating students to follow the university's COVID-19 guidelines. They became true advocates for health and safety. Congratulations to the executive board of the Student Wellness Ambassador Team. Our next award is the Unit Award. This award recognizes a unit or department that has developed a civic engagement initiative or activity at ISU or in the community, reflecting the department's commitment to the public good. This year's honoree is University Galleries. University Galleries functions as a creative laboratory for ISU faculty and students, community members, and visiting artists. All exhibitions and events are free and open to the public. They present critically oriented exhibitions, accessible programming, professional development, and opportunities for engagement directly with contemporary artists. A few examples include protest banner making workshops with Chicago-based artist Aram Han Cifuentes, an exhibition of Iranian-American artist Nazafari Latfi's work curated by the Teen Art Group, online art making videos created since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, and a program with Normal Community High's sociology students inspired by Alice Hargrave's climate change related exhibition. From 2019 to 2021, University Galleries has partnered with over 20 campus and community organizations, in addition to K-12 schools statewide and universities nationwide. Congratulations to the entire team at University Galleries. The next award is the Interdisciplinary Team Award. This award is new this year, and it recognizes a group, team, or initiative that is a multi-department effort of a civic engagement initiative or activity at Illinois State University or in the community. This recognition acknowledges that civic engagement has no boundaries and that collaboration is often required. This year's honoree is the Contact Tracing Unit. With the return of students to campus, a significant increase of COVID-19 cases overwhelmed the existing team at the McLean County Health Department. Dean Judy Newbrander's innovative idea led to a partnership with the McLean County Health Department and the creation of the Contact Tracing Center on campus to manage case investigation and contact tracing for Illinois State University students. The collective efforts of many departments, including Mennonite College of Nursing, Student Health Services, Student Affairs IT, Human Resources, Dean of Students Office, Department of Health Sciences, University Housing Services, Event Management, Dining and Hospitality, and McLean County Department successfully supported students during the pandemic, slowing the spread of the disease. Congratulations to the members of the Contact Tracing Unit. We will now move on to the individual awards. The first award is the Faculty Award. This award recognizes a faculty member who has contributed significantly to incorporating civic engagement into their teaching, scholarly and creative productivity, and/or professional and community service while at Illinois State University. The recognition honors faculty members' commitment to the public good and advancement of civic education within their discipline. This year's honoree is Dr. May Jadala. Dr. Jadala is a professor in the School of Teaching and Learning. She is a co-advisor for the Student Sustainability Committee, co-advisor for Student Environmental Action Coalition, and advisor to students leading the Fossil-Free ISU initiative. She had a powerful nomination from students. One nominator wrote, "Dr. Jadala has not only stepped up the call for civic engagement when we came to her, but every semester she inspires new students to do the same by her involvement with the Student Environmental Action Coalition. Our members could not have found a better role model for civic engagement than what we see in and learn from Dr. Jadala." Congratulations, Dr. Jadala. The next award is the Staff Award. This award recognizes a staff member who is significantly involved in civic engagement activities at Illinois State University and/or in the broader community. This recognition honors staff members who contribute to the public good and embody the core value of civic engagement personally and/or professionally. This year's honoree is Amy Roser. Amy works for University College and is currently president of the Unit 5 Board of Education. Unit 5 is one of the largest school districts in Illinois, serving approximately 13,000 students. It is also one of the largest employers in Bloomington-Normal, with almost 2,000 employees. In her role as president of the board, Amy was elected by the community to serve as a representative of the taxpayers. She works to make students, staff members, and taxpayers all have their views represented and considered. Amy led the district through some very challenging times, including a superintendent transition, social justice protests, and a major pandemic that shut down in-person learning. Congratulations, Amy. Our next award is the Student Award. This award recognizes a student who is significantly involved in civic engagement activities at Illinois State University and/or in the broader community, embodying the ideal of an informed and engaged global citizen. This year's honoree is Joshua Crockett. Joshua is a senior, graduating in May with a degree in political science and a minor in civic engagement and responsibility. Josh transferred to ISU as a junior and has been active in civic life on campus. He has been involved in the Student Government Association as the Secretary for Governmental Relations and past chair of the Civic Engagement Committee. He served as a Census Fellow, encouraging student participation in the 2020 census, and as an election fellow, encouraging student turnout in the 2020 election. Josh supported Illinois Campus Compact's poll worker initiative and served as a regional organizer for a congressional campaign. And just last week, Josh was elected to a 4-year term to Heartland Community College's Board of Trustees. Congratulations, Josh. Congratulations again to all of our nominees and winners. What you do at ISU has a broad impact on our community and beyond, and I am so grateful to you for all you do to lift up our core value of civic engagement. Before we conclude our ceremony today, we do have 2 additional awards to present. This year, the Center for Civic Engagement staff created a new category, Friend of Civic Engagement. Whereas the other Civic Engagement Awards come from campus-wide nominations and are determined by an independent selection committee, the Friend of Civic Engagement Award was created by the Center for Civic Engagement staff to recognize those that we see as going above and beyond to help us fulfill our mission. In the inaugural year for this award, we would like to recognize 2 individuals. Our first Friend of Civic Engagement honoree is Wendy Whitman. Wendy has served as the academic advisor for students in the Civic Engagement and Responsibility minor since its inception. For 11 years, she has guided and supported students to secure the courses they need to achieve this important interdisciplinary minor. By doing so, she has helped so many students explore multiple aspects of civic engagement and prepare them to be active in their communities after graduation. And Wendy, I am so personally grateful to you for your service to ISU. In my new role as director, I am also the director of the Civic Engagement and Responsibility minor. And so I often reach out to Wendy with questions, and I am just so grateful to work alongside her. So thank you so much, Wendy, for all that you do. Our second Friend of Civic Engagement recipient is Dr. Jackie Lanier. Jackie is an associate professor of health science. She has served as a faculty leader of the American Democracy Project for the last 2 years and as the co-chair of the Voter Engagement Coalition. Jackie has been instrumental in the integration of the American Democracy Project programs and initiatives into the Center for Civic Engagement. She also demonstrates a commitment to civic engagement through engaged teaching and community-based experiences for her students, as well as her leadership and service to the School Street Food Pantry. Thank you, Jackie. You are truly an honorary member of the Center for Civic Engagement team. Thank you so much to everyone who has attended our presentation today. You may have noted that we asked for a mailing address when you registered for today's event. Please watch your mail next week for a small token of our appreciation. Thank you for helping us celebrate the important work done over the last year. We are truly grateful to each individual in our campus community who helps us fulfill our mission and advance civic engagement. Have a wonderful evening and a great remainder of the semester.